Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I am going to be talking about my experience of reading Jellyfish Have No Ears by Adele Rosenfeld. And this is a recent work that I picked up, a nice piece of short literary fiction, and I read this because it was a viewer pick for the month of June. Is that what month we're in? I don't know why that's a confusing point right now. But I can't remember. Anyway, in the month of June, for my June TBR, the viewers on my channel had an opportunity to pick what book I would read in the month of July, and this is the one that won for the letter J, J for Jellyfish. And I still really love this cover, like the picture, the color, everything. So definitely wins beautiful book for me. Anyway, yeah, let's talk about it. I'm going to do a full book review for this. So I'm going to tell you what this book is about, what you can expect to experience, what the general outline of the plot is, and talk about how the different elements in this book work together towards the author's intention, maybe, maybe not. Give you what my rating is on this book and who I think would enjoy reading this. So let me go ahead and get started. For ease, and because I tend to get a lot of flashing in my videos for things reflecting off the books, I'm just going to put the book up on the screen. But I do like to show the book so at least you have an idea of how long it is and what the formatting may look like and that kind of thing. All right, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Overall, I would say it's about experiencing ongoing loss of a sense, in this case, your sense of hearing, as well as it explores how difficult it can be to find a way forward when experiencing grief and loss. So more specifically, this book is about a young woman named Louise. And Louise, at the beginning of this story, is somewhere in her early 20s, and she is living in France. She has lived there all her life, and she has also her entire life been hard of hearing. And she has learned over the course of her life how to manage with the hearing loss that she has. And she has worked over the course of years and in therapy and with schools to learn how to work with the hearing that she does have. Louise has always been part of what she calls the hearing community. She's never attended a deaf school or been part of the deaf community as far as she knows. And so she has learned and gotten by working with the hearing that she does have, as well as developing the skill at being able to read people's lips. All that said, when we meet Louise at the beginning of the book, the one thing that she really wants is just a cohesive sense of belonging and to just settle into life and her career as an adult. So kind of your typical like new adult desires. However, when she suddenly finds that she is experiencing rapid and further hearing loss, she comes face to face with the choice of continuing to potentially lose what hearing she has, or to accept a medical procedure that would give her a cochlear ear plant and may forever change her experience of hearing and her sense of hearing for the remainder of her life. There is also the added risk that she may lose her hearing altogether, even with the device. So high risk, high stakes in terms of that. As the story moves on, she continues to struggle with this decision and the impacts of the current new loss of hearing that she is experiencing. There is lots of miscommunication in a variety of different settings, and she eventually has to confront sort of the new loss that she is experiencing and figure out how to move forward. My feeling about this book is that the author really intended us as the readers to be able to experience the process of losing a sense, and in that moment, how that can be a new struggle in life for someone. I think she also wanted to show what it was like to live life with an invisible disability, as well as the struggle that someone with any type of disability can go through when trying to decide how to involve medical advances within their own disability. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the details about how the author went about doing all of these things and whether or not I think she did them all successfully. To start off with, our point of view is from our first person narrator, who is Louise herself. We follow her around from about the time when she is first sitting in the doctor's office, has a hearing test, and then discovers that there is this new hearing loss, all the way through to the point where she is making a decision. And I think this is really effective in terms of bringing the reader into her day-to-day experience. It was a really interesting perspective to be able to pick up and have and walk through. You get the experience of what it's like to be a person with hearing loss who is taking a hearing test, who is going around and trying to rely on lip reading, which I thought was really fascinating because she gets into all the nuance of that and how important like the angle of a person's face can be, as well as lighting in the room, and all of that was explored really, really well. And you also get the experience of what it is like to be someone who, as it's said in the book, has partial hearing. And all of these were new experiences and new thoughts and things that I hadn't thought about before. So I thought it was a great choice to tell this story from the perspective of Louise. The style of writing and the way the entire book is structured and written is very dreamlike. And when I looked it up, I found a lot of people using the word surreal, and I would agree with that. There was a real blending of reality and dream and surreal and unreal things in this book that I was not expecting at all. I really was expecting this to just be a pretty straightforward narrative about this young woman's life. And so I was actually pretty taken off guard to find like how surreal the style was. In fact, it was so surreal that at the beginning of the book, when Louise is at a doctor's appointment, something confusing that I still haven't figured out happens towards the end of the appointment, and I thought she had actually gotten a shot of medication and then spent the rest of the book high. That's not what happened, but that is what it felt like. So be warned, because I have to say personally, I'm not a big fan of surrealistic writing all the time. I like to feel planted where I'm at. I mean, unless it's in a dream. Like if the person's in a dream, then I want it to feel dreamlike. But if they're not, like it can sort of just confuse me and I get lost and I feel like I'm lost in somebody else's dream. And I don't find that a pleasant experience. But anyway, do know that the writing style is very surrealistic in a lot of ways. And the surrealism in the story comes up in a variety of different ways outside just the writing, but I think that is the most prominent one that stood out to me from the very beginning. So I've mentioned that Louise is our narrator. She is the person whom all the action is happening to, so she is the protagonist of the story. We really follow her around from situation to situation, and there are quite a few fairly forward characters in this book. I was surprised by that. For some reason, I thought it was just going to be a handful of people that Louise met, but I would say that the secondary characters in this book for sure are her mother, her bestie Anna, and a potential love interest that comes up. And I won't say more about that because I don't want to spoil anything. But those are probably the people who kind of keep coming around over and over again throughout her experiences. And I liked these characters in her life because I felt like each of them kind of represented the different type of people that someone who is experiencing hearing loss or has hearing loss may be dealing with on a regular basis in their personal life. Her mother was very much playing the role of like the family member, the concerned family member who just wants the best for you, but may not always be expressing their love and support in the most helpful manner, may sometimes be kind of like demanding or playing up on a lot of guilt. Her bestie Anna is definitely that cheerleader in your corner, your ride or die friend who may just sometimes be a bit too opinionated. And I think there was good complexity that was involved in there, as well as like really deep friendship moments where you were like, yeah, I'm glad you have this person in your corner. And then there's a love interest that I won't get into the role that that person plays because I think that will sort of ruin too many things for the book, but they had their own role and representation in her life, and I felt like it was extremely satisfying. There were a slew of tertiary characters surrounding Louise, some of which I enjoyed better than others. She does have coworkers that are with her and different sets of coworkers, and I thought that brought a really unique sort of global outside world perspective. So the experience of having an invisible disability with people who don't know you versus the people who do. And so her coworkers really played a good role of like sort of being the general public reaction and placement of people, because you both had the experience of them not knowing and then learning and then knowing and still trying to work with her. And I think they also cover all the ways that we try to interact with different people, but how we can frequently fail just because we refuse to ask more questions or learn more ourselves. One of the really interesting parts about this book was the setting itself. This was, again, something that I wasn't quite expecting, but really enjoyed in the book. While this book is set in France, it is actually just taking place over the course of, I think, just a couple of months. Basically, Louise finds herself in the situation that because of the way the cochlear ear implant will work with her own nerve endings, she actually has a very limited amount of time in which to decide whether or not this is a procedure she wants. And so that adds a nice amount of tension into the book, and is probably the main way that time plays into the book and the plot. As far as the setting of it being in France goes, I thought that was really unique because you then get into the entire situation of how insurance works there and what decisions are being made for the deaf community, and in terms of medical technology on the political side of things in France. So you do get to have some discussions about healthcare systems and the pros and cons of being in a healthcare system where things are provided for you, but you get into some of the pressures that may come with that on the medical side. There is a lot of good discussion about medical technology and advancements, as well as healthcare in general. And all of these are specific to France, which I wasn't that familiar with, but I think were placed in the book in such a way that you didn't need to have a lot of background information. But I also didn't feel like the author was just info dumping on you, because it would have detracted from the book. And I think she was able to present it in the book in a way that was helpful and led to interesting conversations and led me to have a variety of different thoughts and eye-opening experiences surrounding healthcare and hearing. Another useful aspect of the change of settings in the book is that while you're just sort of in general living slice of life day by day with Louise as she struggles with trying to make this decision, she is going to a couple of different places throughout the book, and I think the author makes really good use of the different settings that she puts her in, whether it is in the workplace so that you get an experience of having an invisible disability within the workplace, whether it's a social setting like a party or in someone's home, and just the change of how well that person knows you and your disability versus not. And then there's also very public settings, whether it's at a museum or in a restaurant or on the street, and how that can impact someone who has hearing loss or has partial hearing in some ears and not others, and just the way that different environments can impact and change the way you are able to hear or not able to hear. And so those were all things that I had never thought of. And so I'm so glad that she had Louise move around to these different settings. It felt very intentional, but in the book itself, very natural. So I kind of walked you through the plot in general, but I'll go a little bit more into specifics of what you can expect throughout the plot of this book. But per usual, I'm not going to do any spoilers. So to start, we are introduced to Louise, and we get some good background on her and her life in the exposition, just in terms of explaining and exploring what her current level of hearing is. In some ways, in a very literal sense, she takes a hearing test, so we literally know what her hearing level is. And there is some quick, sort of breakdown of what it has been over the course of her life. Crisis is very quickly introduced when it is uncovered during her hearing test that she has lost more of her hearing. None of this is a spoiler. This is literally just the premise of the book. And so she has this event. She learns that she has lost more hearing, and she now has a short period of time in which to decide whether or not she's going to get an implant. And she has risk no matter what she chooses. If she chooses to go with the implant, she could potentially regain some hearing. It could stay the same, or she could even lose the hearing she has. And what she does know for sure is that it will change how she hears. And so there will definitely be a learning curve and an adaptation to go with that. So there's definitely a lot of fear of unknown with that choice. Otherwise, she could go on, not have the surgery, but it's still not continuing on as she is, as it becomes clear that she is likely to continue to just lose more and more hearing to the point where she herself becomes deaf. At this point, she has lived her life not having any involvement in the deaf community. She does not know sign language. She only knows how to read lips, and her ability to read lips is fairly significantly based on her ability to partially hear. As we move into the rising action of the story, you just continue to go with Louise as she is trying to make this choice, find a job, live her regular life, but you have an increasing sense of tension as the number of miscommunications with other people around her and in the workplace continue on, and she is just building towards the climax where she has to make a decision about how to move forward with her life in the midst of her grieving over the loss of hearing she's had while trying to cope with her new level and understanding of hearing. At that point, you move into the following action and resolution of the book, which, like most contemporary novels, is pretty short and compact and all together, and you could maybe even argue there is no real resolution to the story, and I'll get to that when I get to my thoughts and opinions on the book, even though I've realistically been scattering them in throughout. So finally, to discuss some of the themes that go on in this book, like I mentioned, this is a work of literary fiction, and I would definitely say that is true versus contemporary fiction. I think the premise of the book makes it sound like it might be contemporary fiction, but the reason I personally would say this is very strongly literary fiction has to do, again, with that writing style and the surrealism that is brought into this. I feel like literary fiction in general tends to focus on writing a lot as a manner of telling a story, and I think that is definitely true for this book. There's also lots of discussion in this book about invisible disabilities, the medical care system, technological advances in medicine, grief, loss, and the process of making life-altering choices. So that is, I hope, a good summary of what you can expect to experience while you're reading in the book and what the book is about and all those kinds of things. And it's like very grainy details. Now, let me share with you my thoughts and my opinions about this book. I'm going to start with some opinions that I have, or at least preferences, I think, that I have, because it definitely will affect my opinion on the book. And so I think you should keep that in mind as I give you feedback about what I thought worked and didn't work in this novel. First of all, I've mentioned throughout that I personally am not a big fan of surrealism in literature. I like magical realism and I like symbolism, but I tend to like it when it's explained and when it's pretty clear. I also tend to like dreamlike elements or fantastical elements in stories to be clearly delineated to a time and space. So if the writing is going to feel dreamlike, I like it to be because somebody is dreaming. Not surprisingly, the elements in the story that I found the least effective included both some of the side characters as well as some aspects of the writing style. I don't want to get into any specific examples of side characters and how they bothered me because that would be a major spoiler in the book, but I think the combination of the writing style and some of the characterization was where you saw most of the surrealism come in. I personally felt like it was very distracting to the main part of the story. I found myself spending a lot of time in the story trying to unpack symbols and understand just what was happening in sort of a subplot, and that really took away from my experience of the plot overall. I really liked the story that was being told about Louise and her relationship with her mom and her friend and this potential love interest. I really liked the different settings that she was going to. There was some light surrealism at times in that reminded me a bit of another book, which was had to do with There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job, that one. The general feel and vibe in reading that book, I definitely felt in Jellyfish Have No Ears. Like, to me, the tone and mood of those books and like the light surrealism, maybe magical realism, maybe I don't know what's really going on, feels very similar in those books. But Jellyfish Have No Ears, I feel like went much deeper at some points into a subplot that became very surreal. And that was the part that I didn't like. Again, felt like it was really confusing. And then finally, when it was explained, it was all of a sudden all at once in what felt like an info dump. And then didn't even leave anything up to interpretation, was very explicit about what was going on. And it was one of those things that when I found out the reveal, I was kind of like, oh, is that what was happening? Huh. So it just didn't seem worth it to me to have sort of this whole weird subplot going on. And when I looked at reviews on the book after, like, I had figured out my own thoughts and all this and that, I found that a lot of people who gave the book a 3-star review or lower all had issues with the same exact thing that I did. There were a lot of things in this book that I did truly like. I thought that there was a very effective use of the setting of the book. Like I said, just taking her into different environments, having the book be one where we were just following her day by day, allowed her to go into those settings in a very natural manner and led to many opportunities of showing a reader what her life was like, what the life of someone who is hard of hearing is like, what it's like to be grappling with hearing loss while still having to go and live life on a daily basis. I thought all of that was really well done. I thought Louisa's characterization was really well done. And I really thought that the experience of hearing loss and dealing with grief and coping with transition was really handled well, and I wish the story had have just stayed focused on that. So when I read the back of the actual physical book, it says, "With Jellyfish Have No Ears, Adele Rosenfeld shines an extraordinary light on the black hole of losing a sense and on the vibrancy that it can arise to fill the void." I think that the first part, which is the shedding light on the black hole of losing a sense, was really well exhibited in this book. I think the vibrancy that can arise to fill the void felt more like murky water and was a little less clear. I think she was trying to express some vibrancy, but that part of the book was so surreal that it was like, waves of light that get distorted to go with the light beam. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was the least impactful part of the book for me. I did think that this book had an impact on me. I really feel like it made me think about aspects of hearing loss that I haven't thought about before, which is what I was hoping for. And it did make me reflect more on relationships I have with people who are experiencing hearing loss or who are hard of hearing. That said, the surrealism aspect was something I really just couldn't get over, and I really felt brought the book down. I ended up giving it 3 stars because overall, as a work, it was just okay. And it may not sound like that. I feel like I said a lot of positive things, but a 3 isn't bad for me. Like, I do not consider 3 bad. I feel like it's more kind of neutral. And I think that makes a lot of sense for my rating because I think if you're someone who really enjoys surrealism and likes things to be sort of a distorted or fever dream kind of experience and only just want it quickly explained towards the end, then this will all work really well for you. Like there is potential. And it's certainly more for me towards the beginning of the book than towards the end. I was okay with some of this realism that was happening. But again, like at some point, I was just like, there was one point where I was confused as to whether or not she had even had the surgery or not. And I don't think I was supposed to be confused about that. So this would have gotten a higher rating for me if it was slightly less stylized and had just been a more straightforward story, but I would still recommend this book. Again, I would recommend it to somebody who really likes literary fiction, who really likes authors to play around with their writing style and a reader's experience and way of experiencing a story, especially if you like surrealism or like fever dream type experiences in your books. I think this is a great book for somebody who likes more open-ended stories and doesn't need a resolution. I think the book does feel a little bit unresolved in some ways, and that was something that didn't personally bother me, but it was something that I noticed a lot in the comments that people left that were negative comments on the book. And I think that this is a great book for somebody who is wanting to learn more about the experience of being hard of hearing or of hearing loss. This is not the story of someone who is deaf or knows sign language or something like that. Throughout the book, Louise does have some level of hearing and way of interpreting the world through sound and lip reading and other means. So that is it. That is my review of Jellyfish Have No Ears. Again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is just my opinion. I can't truly say for you whether or not you would like this book, but I hope I've given you enough information for you to decide whether or not it's something you would like to read. And if you would like to get your own copy of this book, I will include an affiliate link in the description box below so you can support my channel and buy a copy of the book all at the same time. So that's it for me. I will be looking forward to more book reviews and weekly wrap-ups and all the things, and I'll talk to you next time. Oh, and if you've read this book, leave a comment in the description box below and let me know what you thought of it.